Hello. First off, I just want to say that I miss you all and I hope you all are safe. I really miss being able to see you all every day at school and I miss the conversations that we have. Earlier this year, I told you I needed to complete a book study and I had planned to do that in person. However, due to COVID-19, we are not able to be together right now. Thought that Zoom would be the best way to do this presentation. You'll be able to see the PowerPoint, you'll be able to see the book, and you'll be able to see me as I present this to you all. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and my PowerPoint with you all. And then I'm going to have to make it bigger. So give me just 1 second. Okay. Now, like I said, I needed to complete a book study, and I tried to pick a book that would relate to our grade level. After scrolling through and trying to find a book about content literacy, I came across the book Content Literacy Lessons and Text for Comprehension Across the Curriculum by Stephanie Harvey and Anne Goodvis. Now, I may have messed up her last name. That's the way that I pronounced it, though. Content literacy. So, on the screen, you're going to see a picture of the book. I also have this book right here with me. And I thought it would just be best to put a picture on the PowerPoint so you'd be able to see that as well. Now, like I said, I already mentioned who it was written by, but it was published by Heinemann back in 2016. This makes it pretty new still. It's only about 4 years old. I thought that was also a good reason to pick this book. Now, this book provides 12 different lessons that help students improve their comprehension. And these lessons are supposed to be able to be spread throughout different content areas, not just reading. And I'm going to just give you a little bit of a breakdown of how we're going to do this book study. So as mentioned on the last slide, this book provides 12 different strategies or lessons. And I decided I didn't want to do one huge video. I wanted to do 3 separate videos. That way they'd be shorter and they wouldn't take as much as your time up. So I thought that would be best. Plus, I was doing this in person, we would be doing 3 different sessions anyways. And I just want to say that I appreciate you all for listening to this and providing me feedback. Okay, so like I said, we're going to do 3 different sessions. And the first sessions is going to focus on the first 4 lessons in the book. So there's strategies and lessons. The second session will focus on lessons 5 through 8, and the last session will be 9 through 12. And these are really good strategies to use in the classroom. You're going to be familiar with a lot of them because we do a lot of them. But I think it's great that this book provides actual lessons and the setup to be able to help us more, or maybe to help us come up with something different that we might not have thought of before. Okay, so like I said, we're going to focus on the first 4 lessons for this session. Now, this book uses David Pearson's motto. I read that at the beginning and I thought it was interesting. His motto is read it, write it, talk it, and do it. This refers to talking about reading across the curriculum. So not just reading class, but in math class, like in word problems, in social studies, and in science, especially like when we do the Scholastic News articles. And David Pearson's model is not just for one school day. He's referring to reading across the school day, across the curriculum, like I just said, the different content areas, and across the school year. And I thought that's perfect because, we can always include reading in different subject areas, especially in math, where as many math problems as our kids have to read now, I think it's really important that we focus it in math as well. Now, the authors explain that content literacy is about establishing a foundation of thinking strategies. It's our job as teachers to lay down this foundation of thinking strategies. once our students know these thinking strategies, then it's our job to merge the content with them in these different content areas. So it's our job to make sure they know how to do these thinking strategies, and then they should be able to apply them across the curriculum. And then it says we must teach students the 21st century way, and we must have kids to be able to complete 3 tasks to establish this foundation of thinking strategies. And the 3 tasks are they have to be aware of their thinking. So we have to explain it, and so they know how to think. And then they have to be able to think strategically. So not only can they be able to read, they have to not read, but think. But not only do they have to think, they have to think in a way that's going to help them with whatever they're doing. And then they have to recognize the power of their own thinking. So they have to be able to realize that they are in charge of their thinking ultimately. We can provide the strategies and we can explain how to use them, but at the end of the day, they're going to have to recognize it for themselves. Okay. And although I'm on strategy 1 on this PowerPoint, I thought it would be cool to show you something that the authors came up with, and it's a little picture, and I'm going to show you it. And it has a quote by both the authors, and it says, "We teach kids to think so they can acquire and use knowledge. We turn information into knowledge by thinking about it." So, in order for them to really, truly know their knowledge, we have to teach them how to think like this. And then here is the little chart that I thought was very cool, and it has information. So present them the information, allow them to think, and that's how they're going to truly know the knowledge. I just thought that was really neat because that can be applied in all content areas. And then one more thing that I wanted to show you before I talk about the different strategies. The authors also showed this picture. It's like a circle. It's like a cycle. So you begin with knowledge, and I'll show you the picture better in just a second. You start with building knowledge. So preparing them to, then they're going to learn this knowledge. Once they know this knowledge and they're familiar with the content area, whatever it would be, we have to be able to help them activate this knowledge. So they have to be aware, like, oh, I do know this. I know what this means. And then that produces comprehension. And again, this has to be used in all content areas, not just reading. Okay. And something else I'm going to do, I'm going to show you all the pictures that it has for each lesson and strategy, because this book really breaks down the lessons that they provided with. They're strong lessons. It explains why the text matters. It has resources and materials. It even breaks down what the student supplies needs to be, what the classroom supplies needs to be, what book you need to use, as well as an additional book that you can do after this is all over. It also includes goals and assessment, what we want the kids to be able to do once we teach this lesson to them. And it also includes the why and what. It explains why this lesson is important and what it applies to, especially like Common Core, but we don't use Common Core, but we could still relate it to one of our standards. Okay, so like I said, I was going to show you this, and it even breaks it down that as far as what to do for each part of the lesson. It's really cool, and I think it'd be really useful next year in the classroom. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you a picture first. So like I said, we're doing the first lesson, and it is a lesson on distinguishing nonfiction from fiction. And this lesson is actually a 2-day lesson. You can't do it in 1 day according to the authors. And the goals that the authors have created for this lesson is students can identify the difference from fiction and nonfiction texts And the other goal is students can recognize the text features to make up either a fiction or a nonfiction text. Okay, so like I said, it's going to be a lesson that you complete in 2 days with your students. And over here, I know I just showed you all this, but I'm going to show you this again. It's like a how, and then it explains how you release the responsibility to the students. So you start out with all the responsibility, and it shows when to step back and let them take control. So there are different sections for the first day, and it's connect and engage, model, guide, collaborate, and share the learning. So with each step on this book, it breaks it down and it gives you suggestions on what to say, like how you can start it out. So if we look at section 1 and it says connect and engage, it has teacher notes on the side, and it says that you should discuss and define nonfiction and fiction. So at the beginning of this lesson, that's the first thing it wants you to do. It wants you to identify the difference between those two words and to really get your students to begin thinking about what they are going to be doing their lesson on, or what this lesson is going to be on. And it even gives you things you can say, like, for example, it says, we're beginning a study of nonfiction. Have any of you ever heard the word nonfiction? So it gives you like little cues for you to begin the lesson with, which I think is very neat. After you connect and engage, you're going to model what you want your students to be able to do. And and then this lesson, it wants you to look at a real photograph, and it wants you to go over words such as caption and tell the difference between a natural picture and like an illustration, because sometimes our students want to call pictures in our stories pictures no matter what. And sometimes they are illustrations, but a lot of times they are those photographs. And this lesson wants your students to be able to really determine the difference between the two. And then you're going to model that. You're going to model it with an anchor chart. And basically what it wants you to do is to create a big anchor chart and divide it in half, put one as fiction and one as nonfiction, and put the characteristics that belong under each category. After you've done that, which will take a while because you want to talk about it and really have those students to start activating that prior knowledge that they know about this subject. Once you do that, then it says you move on to guiding them. So on the teacher notes, it tells you to discuss the features of a fiction text and help kids determine that it's fiction. It wants you to show them before they're able to do it, which is what we do anyways. We want to make sure that we guide them through that process. That's when we're going to start giving them a little bit more of the responsibility, because we want to see what they're thinking at this point. After you do that, and you have guided them, and you complete the rest of the anchor chart, then it says that you want to collaborate with your students. So you want to discuss with them what fiction and nonfiction is, and you might, it recommends that you gather some books up and write an N for nonfiction and then an F for fiction, like you put it on the cover of the book. And you try to have them determine that they know what fiction versus nonfiction is. So you would show them and explain why each book, but you want them to talk too, to make sure that they're understanding what they're supposed to. And then it says share the learning. So in this case, after you have gone over the fiction versus fiction, when I said that you might label the books, then you're going to scatter some books throughout the whole classroom, and you're going to give your students a sticky note, and they're going to write either F for fiction or N for nonfiction. They're going to do that. And then you're going to come together as a class and share what they have come up with and discuss whether those are right or wrong. And if, they pick something that needs to be fiction and they put nonfiction, you discuss why that is not correct. And then on day 2, you're going to let them do an activity by themselves. It's called practice independently. And let me move on to the next slide too. I'm sorry about that. So they're going to complete an activity and show you that they know the difference between fiction and nonfiction. So for this activity, they want students to be able to create their own covers of a book for you, and they're going to put different features to help them back up whether it's a fiction or a nonfiction. So, and then it included little examples that students have done in the past. And like, for example, a rainy day, they put raindrops in a picture, and they put who it was by, of course, and they tried to put little things to help you know what it meant. After that, you can reflect and assess. So you would do the reflecting. Did I do everything I was supposed to do in this lesson? And what could we have done differently? And you might give them a small assessment, not necessarily paper and pencil. You could use the pictures that they come up with to determine whether they have learned this skill or not. You could use that as their assessment. You could do a little exit slip that has like maybe 2 or 3 questions, or you might complete that exit slip and put, tell me how you feel about this, and they can explain whether they feel confident or if they're still struggling. Just anything, like a small assessment to help you see if they truly know it or not. And that's the first strategy. And we talk about fiction and nonfiction all the time in our classrooms, but I thought this was a really interesting way to teach it, to help them really be able to distinguish the difference. And I also liked their practice independently, where they created their own book cover. I just thought that was so neat, and I have never thought to do that in the classroom. So that's something I've learned. The second lesson or strategy is going to be about explaining a process. And instead of the lesson taking 2 days like the first one did, this is only going to take you 1 day. And the authors have come up with goals for this as well. And it says students can merge their thinking with new information, and students can summarize information using their own words and illustrations. Now, we have talked about how we feel like sometimes our students really do struggling with summarizing. They can't always put it in their own words. And so this is going to be a great lesson that we can take and use next year to try to help them really be able to process their own information and to be able to explain what they have learned using their own words, not necessarily what you've said or what another student has said. So again, it's set up the same way, very similar to the first lesson or strategy, and it has a picture, and it still talks about, and it even has the setup right here, and it talks about the text, why it matters. It includes the resources and materials that you need to use, as well as the book. And it also goes over the classroom supplies and the student supplies. So you'll be able to set that out all before you even begin this lesson, which I think is great. And it also has their goals and assessments that they would like students to be able to do. So I talked about the goals. I have not mentioned the assessment. The student should be able to explain a series of events or a process on a sequence strip using signal words such as first, next, and finally. So by the time that they go through this lesson and it's time to assess them, they're going to be able to process that information and give a quick summary using signal words. So again, I'm going to show you, like I said, it's very similar to what the first lesson was like, but it's just a completely different concept. So at the beginning, it has the connect and engage, just like the first one. And again, it's wanting you to help activate that prior knowledge, get the students to begin thinking about what they're going to be learning about. And it even has notes that you can, it says introduce the topic of the text, show a brief video about the topic. I know I personally love to do that on lessons. I like to show them something. Now, I don't always get to do it, but I do like to show them a video that I know is going to get them really excited about what we're getting ready to begin working on. And that's what this recommends as well. And after you've connected with them and you've really started to activate that prior knowledge, that's when you're going to begin modeling. But first, I'm going to just give you a suggestion of what it says. I'm just going to read what it says. It says, we've been learning a lot about whatever topic you are wanting to talk about. And now we're going to learn about blank. So in other words, you're going to try to get them to remember about knowledge they have already learned, and they're going to process that into new information. They're going to build on their knowledge, in other words. Okay, section 2 is about modeling, and again, you're going, whatever topic that you decide to come up with, it tells you that you explain that you're going to write the steps of how blank happens according to the sequence of events that the book describes. So whatever book you pick, they're going to be able to walk through that book by the sequence of events by the time this is over. And at this point where it says model, you are going to model it. So you're going to use whatever book that you want to use. It recommends the book Plants Eat Insects, which is talking about a science concept. So that would be across the curriculum. So you could do something very similar. It doesn't have to be science, it could be social studies or anything like that. And you're just going to walk them through the steps of how you want them to be able to process this information. And you might say things like, and you're going to read the story to them. You're going to read it just like this story, even though it's about science, just like you would any other book that you read. And once you start reading it, you're going to talk about it with them like you normally would. And after you've read this, you're going to show them a sequence strip, which could be just like the really long strips of that colorful thing. That was something that we might write about sentences on. And it says, so the first thing that happens is blank. And you're going to write that down and show them, this is the first thing that happened in this story. And then it says that you need to section off the sentence strip or the sequence of event strip. And you're going to draw little sections on the sequence strip. And you're going to write about what happens each time. So like first, next, then, last, that type of thing. You're going to write it all there. And you're going to have them help you figure out, well, what happened next in the story. And once everybody in the class agrees on it, then you will write it on your sentence strip. And you're going to do that till you finish it. And of course, you're not going to write down every detail, but you're going to write the most important things that happened in the story, just like you would normally sequencing. After you have modeled it, then you're going to move on to the third section, which is to guide it. And again, it gives you teacher notes on the side, and it even prompts you to tell you what to say if you are stuck. So like right here, it says, let's read about blank. We'll read about this together. So you're going to pick another book at this point, and you're going to have all the students read the story with you. And then you're going to do something very similar to that sequence strip that you just modeled for them. At this point, they're going to be doing it with you. You're going to guide them through it. They're going to get their own sentence or sequence strip, and you're really going to help them. But at this point, you're also going to give them a little bit more responsibility at this part of the lesson, and see how they are doing with it. And then once you finished it, you're going to talk about it and discuss why it's right. And if someone said something wrong, you're going to redirect them to where they're able to do it correctly. After you've guided them through another activity, you're going to collaborate with them. And actually, the kids are going to collaborate among themselves. So this is an activity where you would actually partner your students up. Or if you're like me that have them in pods, you might just make one pod do this activity. So you could put them in groups of 2, or you can just section the pod. It's however you want to do it. And they're going to complete their own sequence strips. So at this point, if I was going to do pods, I would give them all a short story and make them work together to each do a sequence strip. And I would give them time to do that. And as each group is working together, I would walk around the classroom and help them if I see that they're struggling, or redirect them if they are off task for whatever reason. And after everybody has finished, I would actually let them come up to the front of the room and present their short story. And it would be stories that they're all familiar with, so that the other kids would be able to follow along and know exactly what they're talking about. So that's where we go to section 5, share the learning. And that's exactly what I would let them do with this. And that's what the book recommends as well. And then reflect. You as a teacher will reflect and decide, do I need to go over this more tomorrow, or do they have it? Do I need to create this as a small group activity for the ones that are really struggling? That's just up to you as a teacher. But the authors recommend that you really reflect upon the lesson and decide what you need to do with the lesson. And then it says assess. So you can assess them by maybe the story that they're reading that week, like their anchor text. You could have them complete a sequence strip based off that. That way everybody has the same story and they're all familiar with the story, and you'll be able to truly determine whether students have learned that information or not. Okay, so we're on strategy 3, which is the 3rd lesson in the story. And this is focuses on collaborating on focus questions, which is something that I feel like our students really need more of, or at least in my classroom. And this lesson is only 1 day, and here are the goals for the lesson. Students can ask focus questions, and students can work together to discuss, summarize, and share new learning based off the focus question. And the activity that for this lesson is the authors recommend that we share new learning by accurately drawing and writing an answer to a focus question on a large poster. So with that, I would have my students to pair up into groups to do that part, honestly, just because it would be easier, especially if it wants you to use a large poster board. But if you'd want them to do it individually, I would cut the large poster board into sections so you wouldn't have to use as much. But again, it's set up exactly the same as the other lessons in this book. And I think that the authors do a really great job of really breaking it down step by step. If I was to use this in the classroom, I really would feel confident in using it, just because it lays everything out for you. And it also is showing you how you can use it across the curriculum. Like the last lesson, the text that it recommended was about frogs. So it's really talking about science concepts, because in 2nd grade we do some science and social studies, but I think it's important that when we do the social studies and science, we really need to try to incorporate reading with it, because that'll help them once they get to 3rd grade in those testing grades. Okay, so I'm just going to really briefly talk about the 3rd lesson. Everything's the same as far as the connect and engage. So you're going to you're going to activate their prior knowledge about whatever topic you choose. And you might say, we're going to learn some really cool information about blank. So if you wanted to do social studies, you might say, we're going to learn some really cool information on the state of West Virginia if you wanted to focus on your West Virginia state standards as far as West Virginia history goes. And then you might have the students to share a question. You would say, well, who would like to share a question about this? And that's what's going to help them start thinking about whatever topic you choose to talk about. And then here, it actually combines sections 2 and 3 as model and guide. And you're going to combine the two and do the two together. So it says, we're going to watch some of our friends show us how to collaborate with one of these questions. So you're going to give them the focus question. You're going to determine whatever focus question it is that you want. And you're going to model it some, and you're going to guide students to use that as well. So it says blank, blank, and blank. So you choose whichever students are going to come up here and show the rest of the class how to talk together about a question. So you're just going to basically have students show how to talk to each other about something. And, you know, we always have our students collaborating, especially when we do centers or anything like that. They're constantly talking about whatever the topic is. Or if you ask the essential question at the beginning of every story, you might have them work in pairs to come up with an answer. So they're used to collaborating, but you're really going to show them, and you're going to have other students model this. So you're going to be guiding them as you're modeling this. And you're going to ask them questions like, what do you notice that they're doing, and all of that. And then you're going to really go over some focus questions, whichever they may be, whether they're in science or social studies or even reading. Once you have modeled and guided the students to know what they're doing, you're going to let them collaborate together. So you're going to let them work in groups. For this lesson, it recommends groups of 4, which that's what my pods are. I do have some pods of 5, but you know, I say that would work just as well, just as you all think. But it recommends that they work in groups of 4, and you're going to give them a question, one of the focus questions that you have decided to come up with, and you're going to let them put a big question mark in the middle, and they're going to write the focus question underneath it, and then they're going to talk about that focus question depending on whatever content area you're in, and they're going to write their little responses on the sides on the poster. And then you're going to let them draw pictures as well, because they can also demonstrate that they know this through drawing pictures as well as words, because sometimes if they're still learning how to process information, they might not be able to use it in their own words. So you're going to let them work on that for however long you think they need to, and then you're going to let them share what they have come up with. So you might let them come up to the front of the classroom like I typically would, or the book or the authors recommend that you actually just to form one big circle. Everybody's in the circle, and have students to hold up their posters to share to the other kids what they have come up with. And, you know, by them sharing this information, you're going to be able to determine which students know it and which students don't. And if there's a misconception that you're seeing on all the posters, this is the time to take a step back and remodel it to make sure they know how to do it. And then it says that, you know, as a teacher, you need to reflect on what to do, on how you felt like this lesson went, and whether if you need to continue it or not, and as well as assessing them. And I put access instead of assess. I'm sorry about that. But regardless, you need to assess them in some form, whether it be from the big poster or you might make them do something a little bit smaller. Maybe not a poster, maybe like I said, an exit slip, or maybe make them do something similar to the poster. It's up to you. All right, so we're going to focus on the last strategy. And then this will be the last thing that we talk about. And this lesson focuses on interpreting text and pictures. And again, this lesson is only one day, so you'd be able to do this in one class period, or if you really wanted to, you could break it up into different days. This is just what the book recommends. And the author's goals of this lesson is students will notice new learning, infer, and ask questions about pictures and text, and students will be able to transfer oral discussion to written conversations. So instead of just talking about it, they're going to actually be able to write stuff down. And the activity that they want students to be able to do is respond to each other's ideas by drawing and writing comments and questions. So I'm going to, again, it's very similar. It shows you the picture. It tells you the materials that you need. It tells you step by step on how to complete this. And again, if you look at it, and it's going to be, basically they're going to be able to use pictures, which my students love to draw, so they would really enjoy this. And I know your alls would like to do that as well. And so they're going to be able to really understand what the story is saying based off the words in the pictures, and then they're going to be able to draw things. So again, it's set up exactly the same way. It has the engage and connect, or connect and engage, and it has model and guide. It combined those two this time. And then it has collaborate and share the learning. So in this case, during this lesson, it says discuss what it means to have a conversation, oral and written. And I know that we do that during throughout the school year, especially when we have books that talk about the different forms of communication. Especially when we talked about Helen Keller, I think this would be a great lesson to do as we go over that story every year, Helen Keller, because it talks about different forms of communication. So this would be really good to include during that time. And it says, introduce the topic of the text. So if we would use Helen Keller, we would talk about Helen Keller and what's wrong with her. And that would be able to include a different content area. They can be using social studies at this point, because they'll be learning about Helen Keller's life. And later on, throughout these sessions, you'll see that it talks about biographies a lot. And this is Helen Keller is like a biography. So again, set up exact same way. That was for connect and engage. Model and guide are combined at this point, and it has asked 3 kids to model a written conversation for the class. So you're going to actually model what it looks like to have written conversation. So you might put something on the board or the view board, you might show a video, and then once they see that, you're going to actually let 3 kids come up to the class and do their own, which you'll guide them through it, of course, but it'll be a way for that everybody can see what the students are doing. And if they're going to draw pictures, you might include a caption. So if they want to draw a picture up there as a form of communication, then they're going to write a caption for that picture. And they will also practice that at their desk as well after you have let the 3 students come up. And you might give actual pictures. So you might take actual pictures or something, or you might have them look in the book that has real pictures, and you let the students come up with what the captions need to be. So instead of them just thinking and saying it out loud, this is a picture of a frog on a leaf, you have it write it down. Just that way they'll be able to take their thoughts that they're saying orally, they'll be able to actually write it down and process it to write it down. And then you'll do that. And you, like I said, I would provide pictures, real photographs, and let each student come up with a caption for it. And of course, I would walk around as they do that. And once that you have once you have completed the modeling guide, then you're going to collaborate, which means the students are going to collaborate together. And so it'll be into groups of 3 or 4. So again, I would probably just use my pods because it would just be a little bit easier. And you're going to give your students enough pictures or photographs for them to be able to look at it, read it, and think about it. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Hang on. The light went off. As I was saying, you're going to model we're on Collaborate. You're going to pass out those pictures and give them enough time to come up with a caption, and then they're going to write their caption, and they're going to, so each person will get a picture or photograph. They're going to have time to think about it. They're going to write a caption for that picture or photograph, and then you're going to rotate those pictures in each pod. So every student's going to have that opportunity to look at that photograph as well as be able to write a caption for it. And once you have done that, you'll do it until every person in the pod has completed it. And then you're going to share that. You're going to share the written conversations that you came up with, which would be the captions. And that's just a way for them to practice being able to put their thoughts into actual written words. And in a way to share it, you might have everyone join in a circle, or you can even let them come up to the front of the class. It's however you want to do it. After that, teachers need to reflect on how they felt like the lesson went. Again, did every student truly understand the skill? Do you have to go back and reteach this in small groups? It's up to you as the teacher, but just reflecting on how the lesson went overall. And then again, you can assess them because you can assess them by you could maybe put a picture on the board or on the view board, or you can pull up a picture on the internet, and you let each student write their own caption about what's going on in that picture, and that will be able to help you determine whether you know that, whether they need the information or not. Okay, so that's the end of the first session. Again, we covered lessons 1 through 4, and we talked about how they can go in and out of the different content areas. If you all have any questions or comments about the first session, please message me or call me. You can send me a text, any of those ways that we communicate. And like I said, the first 4 strategies are mostly used in social studies and science as well as reading. You could include it for math, depending on what word problems you have and depending on what you're working on, but you could still apply some of these strategies to math as well. Now, the next time that we talk about this book, we'll be focusing on lessons 5 through 8. Thank you all so much for your time, and you all have no idea how much I appreciate it. I will talk to you all later. Bye. And I have to end the session first, or stop sharing my screen first, and now I'm going to end the session. I'll see you all later. Bye.